If you've been out on the Trans-Canada here by Dunmore, you probably have noticed the boat inspection station. Do you know what it's all about? If you've been pulling a boat, then you should have pulled in and had it checked. But if you haven't been in there and learned all about what they're trying to do, then stay tuned, because Sophie is out there talking to the invasive mussel people.
Thanks, Corlane. Hi, I'm Sophie Filion, and I'm here at the Dunmore Way Station at the Aquatic Invasive Species Watercraft Inspection. And I'm here with Loren today. Loren, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Can we start off by you telling us a little bit about who you are, what it is you do, and how you got interested in this field?
Sure. So I'm a third-year ecosystem management student at Lethbridge College, and I've always had a passion for fish and wildlife and stuff like that. So I was actually introduced to the job through my sister, who works for Alberta Agriculture. She's a water specialist, and I thought it would be a very good summer job just to kind of get some experience in the natural resource conservation field. So
that's awesome. So what is this inspection station? What are you inspecting here?
So we inspect all watercraft, so basically anything that goes in the water. So that includes kayaks, canoes, paddle boards, motor boats, wakeboard boats, anything that goes in the water. And basically what we're checking for are aquatic invasive species, so particularly things like zebra mussels, quagga mussels, and other invasive types of weeds and parasites.
All right, so I've heard a little bit about the quagga mussels and the zebra mussels and how problematic they are.
Yeah.
Could you just give us a little bit of a backstory on how they came to Canada in the first place and how they're transferred around?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the zebra and quagga mussels were actually first introduced, they came over from the Black and Caspian Sea, and so what happens is the big shipper tanks come over and they empty their ballast water into Canada's freshwater system. And so that's how they got first introduced into Canada. So out east in a lot of the Great Lakes right now, there's a huge problem with them, and basically anytime a boater goes boating in any of the Great Lakes and stuff, there's a chance that the mussels can actually attach to the boat and then get transported to different lakes across Canada depending on where the boater is going to.
Okay, so if they happen to come into Alberta, and I know that's what you're trying to prevent, but if they ended up here, what would be the effect they would have? Can you describe like the ecological and economical impacts?
Absolutely. Well, for Alberta specifically, it would be particularly devastating because we have a lot of irrigation systems. So if they were to get into irrigation pipes and stuff like that, they would actually clog up the pipes, and that costs a lot of money to repair. And that's a lot of people's livelihood, a lot of farmers and whatnot. In terms of ecologically, once the mussels are in the water, they are very, very prolific. They reproduce very quickly, and once they're in the water, they're next to impossible to get rid of. So the mussels, they filter water up to 1 liter a day per mussel. And so a lot of people think, well, oh, it makes the water nice and clear, but from a biological perspective, basically all the nutrients have been taken out of the water, so it leaves nothing left for other native species to survive. And once there's clear water as well, it allows a lot of the sunlight down to the bottom of the lake, and that allows a lot of aquatic weeds to grow, which ends up taking out a lot of oxygen in the water, which can also be very bad for other species in the water as well.
Wow. So last time we filmed Prairie Adventures, we talked about wetlands and their importance, especially in our dry southern Alberta climate.
Yeah.
And I know they're really especially at risk.
Yeah.
Can the invasive mussels go into our wetlands, like smaller bodies of water?
Yeah, absolutely. So especially some of the more popular boating destinations for a lot of people coming through Alberta, just because a lot of the waterways are actually connected by streams and rivers and stuff like that, it allows the mussels to actually spread. And so just because there is a huge network of waterways, once they get in there, they pretty much have free rein to go wherever they like. And like I said, boats are their number one mode of transportation as well. So when the boats go in the water, they sometimes carry some of that lake water with them in the boat. And then if they go to a different water body, there's a chance of that getting spread to different other lakes and stuff. So.
But I know the government of Alberta is working really hard, and you guys are working really hard to stop this from happening.
Yeah.
So one of your campaigns, I think, is Clean, Drain, and Dry.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the goal of this program is?
Yeah, so basically anytime, we're just reminding boaters that anytime they go boating, before they leave the lake, the boat should be clean, drained, and dry. So anything like weeds, mud, any type of water, and the mussels themselves, if you happen to see those on the boat, you definitely don't want to be transporting that. So that just means taking extra precaution to make sure that any sort of internal compartments are completely dry before you leave the lake. It's just a matter of walking around the boat and picking off any weeds that might be hanging off, or also just things like mud. Just make sure that all that kind of stuff is off of the boat before you leave the lake, because they all have the potential to carry parasites and whatnot, and you don't want to be transporting that to different water bodies as well. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So even if I went through the whole process, made sure everything was clean and dry, would I still have to stop here at the inspection station?
You do still have to stop. It is mandatory. And also it's a very good way for us to kind of monitor some of the lakes that a lot of boaters are coming from. So all of our crew members are trained to specifically find invasive species and whatnot. So we kind of follow the protocol that we were kind of taught, and that way we can just make sure that there's nothing on their boat that shouldn't be.
That's great. So if I, for example, I would never do this, but if I just kept driving,
Yeah.
Are there consequences to not stopping if you're...
Well, there aren't any like permanent legislation right now, but we have had Fish and Wildlife officers or the DOT officers pull people back, and you know, they can get a warding or potentially a court appearance, but as of now, there's still a work in progress for having dollar amounts put into a ticket, I guess. And so some of the things that we're kind of looking into right now are potentially having a ticket for, you know, not having your plug pulled while you're transporting the boat. And then yes, again, if you do skip a station, there could also be a potential fine for that as well. So.
All right. So I know you have an inspection process that you use. Can you just tell us the general steps that you take?
Sure, yeah. So when a boater drives into the station here, typically what we do is we introduce ourselves, just make sure that they kind of know why they're here, and we kind of inform them that we're, you know, conducting watercraft inspections for invasive species. And then upon asking a few more questions, we just kind of get a better idea of where the boat has been in the last 30 days. And that's just because if they are coming from an infested lake, the zebra mussel and quagga mussels can actually survive 30 days outside of water. So depending on where they're coming from, we determine if it's coming from a high-risk area or a low-risk area, and then we conduct the proper inspection based on where they're from. So a low-risk inspection will still look in, you know, around the boat and the engine area and whatnot, but for high-risk inspections, it's a little more thorough. We go actually inside the boat, looking all inside the internal compartments and whatnot, and just make sure that all the equipment and everything else is nice and dry. And if we do find that, you know, there is standing water in there, basically we just give them a hot wash. So we have our unit here, it's a hot wash unit, and so we typically do internal compartments at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And then if there's anything on the outside of the boat, we'll actually do 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's basically just the temperature that would kill the mussels or any sort of like mud and stuff like that. But just to clarify, when we actually do find mussels, the boat does have to be completely decontaminated. So basically our inspectors, what we do is if we find standing water, that's when we'll give them a wash. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then also a huge part of our job too is to actually educate the boater on what they can do just to make sure that their boat is good to go. So clean, drained, and dry. And just kind of informing them on, you know, the implications for if we did have zebra mussels here, like the different, I guess, repercussions that might come from that. So. Yeah, and then that way, once you spread the word, people can kind of understand a bit better like why we're here and why our job is so important.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah.
So I also heard that you have a secret weapon in the form of some very special dogs that help you detect the aquatic invasive species.
Yeah, we do.
Can you tell us about their work a little bit?
Yeah, so these dogs, they're working dogs. They're government of Alberta employees, just like us, and basically they are specifically trained to sniff out mussels and other, you know, invasive weeds and stuff like that. So they've gone through extensive training down in the United States just to kind of hone their skills in, and they're really handy, like especially on the busy long weekends. They come and they sniff around the boats, and it's actually fun to watch them work too, because when they actually do find a mussel, what they do is they sit down, and then the handler will actually get them to point their nose like on the boat to show them where it is, and then the handler can go in and see if it actually is a mussel. And it's good because they're actually very successful with that. So, and then once they're done, we actually still go around and do our own inspection and hop inside the boat if it's a high-risk area. But yeah, we enjoy having them around too. It kind of lightens up the day a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And now just to wrap up, do you have any other tips or tricks for people that want to stop the spread of these aquatic invasive species, but maybe that don't have watercraft of their own?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're ever out boating, or not boating, but just at lakes where, you know, just for a recreation or whatever, if you're walking along the shoreline and you happen to see something that looks out of the ordinary, like a mussel shape that's attached to like rocks or something like that, there is an invasive species hotline. It's 24 hours, and the number is 1-855-336-BOAT. So if you happen to see any sort of invasive species, or you think something might be a little off, you can just call that hotline, and they will kind of give you directions from there. Also, another thing too is if you just have aquarium pets at home, we're just recommending that people don't flush them down the toilet, especially if they're alive still, because then they just go into the water system. And sometimes they carry parasites as well. So even though you don't have a boat, you can still kind of take precautions with different things like that, and just kind of ensures that, you know, you're not spreading any invasive parasites as well. So yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Loren.
Thank you for having me.
Back to you, Corlaine.